Business Committee's meeting on January 31st, 2024. And we don't have to call the roll.
We do.
We do have to
I
call
can do
the
it
roll.
really quickly.
Okay, please.
Member
do.
Anderson?
Here.
Member Douglas is absent. Member Fisher?
Here.
Co-Chair Dewart?
Here?
Co-Chair Lemieux?
Here.
Member Lawrence? Here. Member Lynch? Here. Member Osterline is absent. And Member Zeisowitz?
Here.
Wonderful.
Okay,
All right, you have a quorum, sir.
all right. Do we have to pledge or no pledge?
No pledge?
Nope, that. And we don't have meeting minutes or anything else like that.
No.
So we have no guests. And
So we're okay with those notes just staying as notes?
Yeah, there was not a quorum at the last two meetings of this
Okay.
group. There was not an official quorum, so
Okay.
they were just notes.
Okay.
okay, so looking forward, will we have minutes, given that we do have?
We will have minutes from this evening.
Okay, fine. And we have one item really to discuss collectively. Unless you want to dispense with your report first, we'll.
Mine will be
Chat with you.
combined.
It's all combined. Okay. Well, I think I've met a couple of new people tonight. I'm Mark Dewart, and I've been here in Lick Bluff for 40-something years, and retired from Abbott, and served for 10 years on the village board, and I'm involved with more things around town than I care to discuss. So I'm really pleased to have Paul serve as a co-chair,
Thank you.
and I was especially pleased because Paul brings substantial experience in small business to this perspective. I don't, but Paul does, and so I think that's really, really important to our mission. So Drew is going to kind of steer us off this evening and get us started as a group again. We would like to kind of get our legs and find our mission and move forward with this really important committee. It's important to the community, the business mission of the community. And so thank you again for coming out this evening. Drew?
All right. I'm going to go through several slides to kind of catch everybody up to speed. It's been a year or so since we've met. And hopefully everybody can see this. So we're going to cover, again, a little background and why this group came together, what's the mission as laid out, and go through a series of, it's about 10 strategies, tactics, and tools that come from the report that was linked. That is still in draft form, but I will tell you that it's really just short of updating the tables and the statistical information in the back of the. Otherwise, it's, unless there's direction from tonight, which certainly can be, I'm going to cover up those, and then bring up a couple other topics that may be of interest, and then I think look to get you guys out of here in a decent hour. But I think hopefully we can come through this and maybe narrow the focus of what you guys want to talk about and focus in on. And it could be on this list, maybe it's not. But I will tell you, over the last 12 months, there hasn't been many burning issues that come to the village board about regulatory issues that really have been of the nature that I would have brought to you all to bounce off of you. That's just the way it is sometimes. But anyway, I think one of the things we talked about too very early on was it's not meeting for meeting's sake, right? Respect everybody's time, and so I think try to stick to that and continue that. So this group was created a couple years ago by the current village president. It's an ad hoc committee, and so what that means is ad hoc committees are created by elected leaders that are not, it's not codified, it's not a standing committee of the village. That's on within the municipal code, so it can come and go with the presidents. They can choose to keep it going or not. So, but this is an ad hoc committee. As a point of comparison, the Sustainability and Community Enhancement Committee has been around for many years, and it's also an ad hoc committee. So some of these things get, lives of their own and continue. This is a body that's intended to advise elected leadership as well as myself as the Chief Administrative Officer of the village. It did have 11 members. Mr. DeRossier has stepped off, but I think the door is still open to him if he wants to come back. I think one of the things that I've talked about briefly with the co-chairs before we met was the idea of maybe bringing in somebody from the west side of town at least to get some representation from the business park area. And I know that this group has struggled to do that over the years and trying to find people to do that, willing to put the time in. But that's still an issue to get addressed. And generally speaking, what this group is about is periodically evaluating the economy of the village, finding ways to promote its health as a business community, and that's kind of the high level. And how do we do that? These first three strategies are, I think, more high level, but these come from the list that's in the report. I don't know that these are controversial or up for a great amount of debate, but if there are comments or questions from them, there hasn't been previously. I don't know if there are.
You know, this may not be the appropriate point for it as you go through this review, but I guess, you know, is the vision that this is a reactive body, things come to us, we react to them and we're done? Or is the idea that we're also proactive, we're doing something, you know, that to be identified, but.
I think ideally, this body is working in a proactive mode.
Okay.
I think it'll be difficult to do so because some of those are more difficult to get accomplished.
Yes. Yeah.
But nonetheless, I think that would be an ideal state.
Okay, good, all right. That's...
Some of these get harder to read, but these are all trying to support high-quality commercial and residential development, and the general theme that came from this group is more is more. And so you see that with a push for higher density residential housing. It talks about developing packaging or marketing materials for commercial spaces and trying to be very aggressive in economic development. And that is a general theme throughout this document. I would say that I'm going to talk a little bit later about missing middle housing and about multifamily. That's something that this came from this group, was a big push to get back and look at the village's R5, which is its multifamily zoning, and say, you know, it doesn't achieve what we appear to have wanted to achieve in the first place, and that you can't build what's there under the current R5 regulations. And that's a great place to start. That's what we're hearing from a consultant as well as others over the years. So we'll see where that conversation leads, but I'll get into that a little bit later. Streamlining and village procedures for mostly the village, I would say, on the continuum of zoning, we're probably slightly more on the heavy side in terms of review of projects. Not on the far end. I put Lake Forest and other communities on the far side of that. We're not that. But the village has made, I would say, substantial progress in doing that. The village has changed a number of regulations that no longer require certain projects to go in front of the ABR for design review and the village board for final approval. Right now, there's a lot of projects that just go straight to design review, and then they can go for a building permit. Similarly, the village has, over the years, loosened its regulatory hold over the Waukegan Road Business Corridor. That comes back from the Waukegan Road Corridor study, going back several years, where they suggested allowing many more uses as of right. The village has done that. I'll show you some data here later on, talking about the tenancy is very strong out there. I think that's a result of that. And that may be another area where you can get out in front of some other issues still. But generally speaking, the village has made a number of steps, and where that shows through, interesting enough, is the village administration, we look at over every year, you look back and say, okay, how many resolutions and ordinances, you know, how much legislation was approved by the body over time, and that number is shrinking. And that's because the board is not being, you know, a final step in a multi-process, is that it's ending at zoning board. Zoning board has more authority, ABR has more authority, and there's other activities that are approved by staff, so that those procedures get reduced, and presumably reducing cost and time for the business community. A lot of these are, this top one talks about just having open dialogue with business owners, and I think that's happening. I haven't heard that it's not. That's just a standing strategy, if you will. These comments about CBD parking, good news, the village, over the last couple of years, when the village has redone the central business district, almost all of it, in terms of the streetscape program, we picked up, I think, 3 parking stalls just by restriping and taking advantage of some extra space, adding to the public inventory. The village has also reimagined the regulations in the CBD, where now that the village, if you're coming in, you're changing uses, that you get, Gary, you've taken advantage of this. The new rules are that the village board is of the mind that there's really not, it's gonna be very difficult to create new parking spaces in private properties. And that's been decided on many properties in the downtown because they've already been redeveloped, and you can't, carve out spaces where they don't exist today. So why not create an unnecessary hurdle? And so the village just says, if you're willing to push your employees to the train station, it's a much quicker path to get projects done.
Has that been effective?
Testimonial?
We went backwards, yeah, we weren't required to add more parking. And, I think that was the whole Center Avenue partnership. If something came back again, you can't just add if you don't have it, or say, well, now you're going to have to put into
Yeah.
this so-and-so fund to be able to do this. It
I'll
just doesn't exist.
Yeah, so the idea that Gary's project for his pub had a requirement, a condition of approval that said he had to add 2 parking spaces or 3?
I think it was 3 originally.
3 behind, redoing some of his parking lot, taking out some other spaces, and rearranging in pretty expensive venture, and that was approved. He didn't do the project, came back, and because the time lapsed, he had to go back through the process again, and when he did, he took advantage of his existing rules, and that condition of approval came off.
I think that's great. And the reason I asked is because, talking about employee parking and incentives to get them off-site, in Block 1, I'd say after 4 o'clock, 90% of the time, it's employees parking behind our building, which is supposedly supposed to be open to patrons of those businesses after 5 o'clock.
And that's a tough example because that's written in a way that if somebody is an employee and they're working there still, they're allowed to park there. So it gets a little blurred.
So the service personnel, a waitress is an employee, so they are allowed to park in customer parking?
That they shouldn't be. No, they should not be. But like if you're on the second floor and you're in, you're a patent attorney working in the pharmaceutical industry and you're still working, you're allowed to be there after those hours, right?
No, I understand that.
But yes, right. Presumably the wait staff should not be there. They should be in the train station.
Okay.
Is that kind of where you're talking about 7B up there too?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I know Ron brought that up. Osterline, he said he was using that. So yeah, I think these tools are working and seem to be having positive impacts for the business community so far. Number 9, I don't know that there's been any progress or pursuit of that. There are certain communities that have tried to, for example, like Chattanooga, Tennessee, has worked extremely hard over the last several decades to make them one of the highest high-speed internet communities in the nation. That took an extreme amount of essentially a municipally funded utility that got established for that purpose and is paying dividends now. But not a lot of that is happening in the greater Chicagoland area that I'm aware of. The beautification of 41-176 corridors, again, I don't know if anybody would find that controversial. There's always something going on to some degree with removal of invasive species along there. Painting has not made its way into of the railroad viaducts, has not made its way into the budget yet, but I will tell you that meeting with the Union Pacific Railroad and Metro officials last summer, they're telling us that those bridges will be rebuilt in the next 20 years, like all of that.
The beautification has basically been taken care of by open lands, though. It's not a village project, right?
It has been, actually, it's been a village grant to do the removal and a multi-year campaign to spray and keep the buckthorn from coming back. But then the village, once it's under control, we've given Elabola the ability to go in and maintain it after that. And I would say there's some, like, there's the south side of 176 from Green Bay Road to the viaduct needs some attention still.
Has there been any further talk about burying power lines along 176?
Not past usual, you know, whatever it was, 20 years ago, it was $1 million a mile. I can't imagine what it is now. The village could do that and make Lake Bluff ratepayers pay for that. I mean, that's something that can be pursued. ComEd has a program that does that. It puts a surcharge on everybody's electric bill. But it hasn't really come up. Now, that may come through with the village's update of its comprehensive land use plan, something like that, the village, I mean, but I have not heard that.
I just see it as one of the worst aesthetics on the street.
Is any plan, after you remove all the greens there, is any landscape planning to do there? Is any?
Yes.
Do you have any idea what you are going to do?
Yes, there's a corridor plan that shows, I will call it planned indifference, where there's like a mowed meandering lawn, where then it meets up with more natural plantings and trees so that it looks, so it has a maintained look, but not a completely manicured look. And that focuses on native plantings with the occasional split rail fencing to know that it's a continuity of the aesthetic that represents the village that's along Sheridan Road. And so it's that same visual connective
that's
tissue
right.
that you know you're in Lake Bluff when you see this type of landscape architecture. So yeah, there's a plan, it's on the village's, I can share it back out with folks, but it's on the village's website.
I would like to see it.
Yeah.
And it's only from Green Bay to the east part, or is from the tracks?
All the major corridors and gateways.
You mentioned the south side, though, on 176 between Green Bay and the viaduct. What about the north side? And I only mention that because there's a combination of closer to Green Bay, there's curbs, bushes that kind of encroach, as well as people's landscaping encroaches sidewalk. There's a mixture of gravel, there's a mixture of every possible thing you can think of through there. It's just kind of a...
Yeah, I mean, that's IDOT right away. And
That's right, yeah.
yeah, so I think someday they may come up with some idea. I don't know that they would have reason to continue the curb and want to add that expense. So I think if there is something that's done there, it would have to be probably a collective pursuit, or maybe maybe even subsidized by the village to do something that would help get a uniform look through there.
Yeah.
I'm going to jump topics here. This is kind of getting to what I mentioned earlier about I'll go down to the commercial version or data here. So this is as of, I'm going to say a week ago, that the village's Green Bay Road corridor and its retail vacancy rate is, sub 5%. This is exceptional. And I think the industrial flex and the office is part of that very low vacancy rate is due to the village's loosening of the regulations and increasing tenancy out in the office park. I'm aware of a handful of buildings that are available, but I think they've changed hands, and there's some incoming users coming in that once they get that through, it's going to remain low for the near term, which is great. The one number that we're watching closely is that office number. That figure in the county is 16.7%, I think, in terms of current vacancy rates. And that most real estate professionals are saying that, post-COVID and the shakeup, the resetting of that is going to go 30, 40% a lot of places. So we'll see. But again, I think Lake Bluff is better positioned than a lot of other communities that have a lot of office, that Class B, Class C office. I mean, I think we're in a very, very good position.
Do you know the source of your data on?
CoStar
rental?
from Lake County Partners.
Okay.
Yeah.
How do we compare with our Lake Forest friends for that, do you know?
We're a little better off, but they have more of it. You have Conway. I know at last week's Chamber of Commerce meeting, the city manager from Lake Forest talked about that there have been some consolidations. But I think if you look maybe, from a lease, they may be still, numbers may look okay on paper, but are they occupied, So I think that's going to take a while to shake out. Yeah.
So that's an interesting idea. This is leased data, not occupied necessarily.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
But it's, I'm sorry, yeah, it's pretty close, other than office. Office could be leased and not occupied,
Right.
But Lake Bluff, we don't have a lot of office left, it's a lot
That's
of.
a good thing.
Yeah. So that helps. Brad, I don't know if you want to talk about the residential at all.
Do you want me to read my prepared comment?
Prefer not.
And don't take this the wrong way, please, but the first comment I have is that I just don't think it's possible for an advisory committee to formulate and finalize thoughtful recommendations to the village board if we don't meet more regularly. We were originally scheduled to meet once a month. We haven't met for a year.
Yeah.
I read through the minutes from the February meeting of 2023, had no recollection of it. Now, I'm 66, so that's part of it, but
Yeah.
it's hard to stay focused on anything
Yeah.
if you don't do it on a regular basis. And if we're going to be committed to this, at least for me, I want to know that we're doing something beneficial, because I've got a lot of other meetings I can attend, and I'd love to contribute, but I just want to make sure that it's a meaningful discussion. Next, I do think the scope of our work should be prioritized and narrowed in order to allow us the time necessary to dig deep on certain topics, especially those that have been disregarded for so many years. I think I sent Drew, you a copy of a long-range plan dating back to like the 70s.
Yeah.
And in the long-range plan in the 70s, it called for a need for an expansion of our multifamily housing district. That message was repeated in the 1997 plan, which I was a part of. And from 1997 to 2024, there's been no change made. And I think it's almost embarrassing that we have recognized an issue, disregarded it, and made no further action to correct it. That sounded negative, but it's hopefully to bring out the next issue that I think, we really have to look at what it is the people that are the residents and stakeholders in Lake Bluff are interested in most. I do believe a SWOT analysis is a great starting point for any discussion about planning, but once completed, we need to prioritize these most urgent and necessary needs of the village. While many look to me as a pro-development activist, it's only the result of my understanding of the needs of our residents. And if you examine the results of the survey included in the 1997 plan, which had an incredible response rate of over 50%, I'm sure Paul and Mark remember this, and Deb as well, there was one question that raised my eyes and my thought process about this more than anything else, and it was the question, how long do you plan to live in Lake Bluff? And a preponderance of the residents and again, this is 50% of the residents in town, households in town responded, they said they plan to live here through retirement. The issue is that once people retire and their families migrate out of their households, they have no housing options to keep them within the village. Lake Bluff has just one condominium unit in the entire village with a first floor master bedroom in the apartment building next door. And I think it's embarrassing as we look at the demographics of our community, it's an aging population compared to most of Lake County, to think that we're losing these vital resources that have been contributors to the village, many of which have lived here their entire lives, and then when they want to get out of their single-family home, yet they want to stay in town, there's really very, very few options, and most of these residents are lost to Lake Forest. My parents moved to Lake Forest to move in a ranch house after they sold their house. My uncle moved out of Lake Bluff. A lot of people move from Lake Bluff now straight to Lake Forest Place or another retirement community because there's no middle ground here within the community. And when you look at all the planning studies done, and the one that was presented, which I thought was the best, that we were encouraged to attend years ago at Lake Forest College about urban planning, I'm sure you remember it, Drew. They pointed to the fact that seniors derive the best utility when living around younger people, and that younger people also appreciate having the generational advantages of families, grandparents, et cetera, within a community. And I think we're shutting a big part of that community and a big part of that knowledge base out of our town and somewhere else. So that's where I would like to focus.
Can I interject?
You want me to go through this? Because this is,
Well, I was.
speaks to Brett. Yep.
Yeah, I just, to your point, Drew and Paul and I have had a number of dialogues over the last several months since Regis asked the two of us to get involved. And I wanted to let you know that as recently as discussions yesterday, that that we wanted to do was to, looking forward to our next meetings, is to go through the SWOT to identify and prioritize what's in the SWOT, and then look at, as a starter, the strategies, the 13 or 12 strategies, and determine which of those reflect what we're interested in as a group. And if there are 2 or 4 or some number, hopefully, and then figure out, and those should correspond to the SWOT, strengths and weaknesses, opportunity, those kinds of things, and work our way through that. And recognizing that the only way to do this effectively is for us to find something that we can embrace and sink our teeth in, to Paul's point about being not just reactive. And that's part of what we're here, is to analyze and report back to the board, but we'd love for us to find a couple of things that we're excited about and say, we want to take a little leadership. We want to do our own analysis. We want to come back and say, you didn't really ask for it, but it occurred to us that these things were important. And we've spent a little time with it, and we've outlined it. We don't have to write a 50-page report, but we can at least report back to the village board and to Drew and say, a funny thing happened along the way, and we determined that a couple of things here are really important, and we ought to talk about them. And so to that point, I wanted to tell you thank you, but at the same time to tell you that
Listen,
we're headed, that's the direction that we
I
really
am-
thought it important that,
Mark, I am super excited that you and Paul are on this committee, because you were involved with Methodist Homes, I think it was called, came forward with a plan for the West Terrace, and that kind of fizzled and went along the wayside. But there's been opportunities over the years that have come forward that would provide the type of housing I'm talking about, and it seems like it gets a quick start and then it stops. And I think someone has to champion the cause for our seniors in town.
okay. At that point,
Yeah.
Mr. Irwin.
And, you know, the comprehensive plan is also adding a lot to this whole thing, too. So
Yeah.
some of what we're talking here is actually being diligently talked about as part of that whole comprehensive plan that the PCZBA is focusing on and having meetings and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
tying that in, you know, I think just so that we're not all going in different directions, but maybe that's where we can also find some of the things to champion, because there's some good ideas there. And, you know, I encourage everyone, if you haven't looked at that map to see what people are, what ideas they're suggesting and everything, there's some interesting things there as starters of conversation, so.
So, yeah, the village is about halfway through a process of updating its comprehensive land use plan, and that's the blueprint for how the village wants it to be developed over time, usually about a 20 to 30-year window. And this current update, the village has hired Tesca and Opticos out of, originally out of Pasadena, but they have a Chicago office now, but their specialty is missing middle housing. And what that is it looks at
Your stuff.
product of housing that's on a continuum, and I'll show you a nice
pointing to the
image of
lower
this
end of
in
it.
a minute, but it's between detached single-family and mid-rise. There's a lot of product type that's in between those two bookends that has been carved out of zoning codes across America and certainly in Lake Bluff. And the issue is there's shifting demographics here in Lake Bluff. We talked about what almost 20% of the village is already over the age of 65. That's happening, you know, 1 in 5 Americans by 2030. So these shifts are not only happening here, they're happening everywhere. And you see these numbers, it's, you know, single-family households, and when you have what we have, very beautiful, very lovely detached single-family housing, some of it larger lots, it gets to be where people, as Brad pointed out, people don't want to maintain that as they get into, you know, the third and fourth quarter of their lives, and or even people coming the first quarter of their lives. So it's a matchup problem where your demographics don't match your housing stock. Different way to look at this is that, you know, villages, you know, Les says it in big letters there. It's missing because we just don't have it. You know, we don't have that type of product in town. Why don't we? Not unlike most America, Lake Bluff, about half of the town is zoned residential. 99% of that is zoned for detached single family. We do that extremely well. The other stuff,
But that's what we can control and influence.
That was a big.
If we see a need for it,
So, you know, real estate in Lake Bluff, residential real estate was the big tax base.
Yeah.
That's where they focus on it.
is it, yeah, well, so this is another,
Income.
yeah.
There's no other industry except for real estate in Lake Bluff, per se, it's tax-based relationship. So that's why we're focused on it.
auto and homes, that's what brings in all the revenue to our community.
I'm sorry, what,
Auto and homes.
auto and home?
So the
Yeah.
general fund of the village, the main, like, pocketbook, if you will, of the village, the general fund, a third of that is sales tax, another third is property tax. So,
Big money in property tax.
yeah, but commercial property tax generally brings, you know, a lot of revenue as well. And if this is another way to look at the previous slide, a different way to show it is, you know, graphically, the blue little postage stamp there, that's where you can build multifamily today, at least, almost. There's enough barriers within our zoning code to preclude it, even with the areas where you're supposed to build R5.
Our R5 district has been taken over by single-family homes.
Yeah, well, and the code defaults to that. The code pushes that.
Well, right, because
Yeah.
there's no
Yeah.
option to do it under our current code with a multifamily structure.
Yeah.
And parking requirements.
So, Yeah, it's, your point earlier, underlying land values make multifamily more difficult to do, but that's why developers want to go vertically, to try to get that margin that they're looking for. But we hear all the time, people are interested in this type of housing product type. This is everybody knows somebody in town who fits these profiles, the divorcee, the senior couple, or somebody else who maybe has a senior parent that wants to be close. The village has created a pathway to allow for accessory dwelling units. Hasn't had one built.
It hasn't happened, yeah, I was gonna say.
I don't want.
It's the infrastructure costs. I've looked at it in several different properties, and running sewer and water to an auxiliary structure on the backside of your lot and connecting to the front side of your lot makes it really a little more of a project than a cottage.
Got it. Well, the village has tried to open the door for, creating other types. Nobody's stepped their foot in it yet. This is the other image I was talking about. I've shared this a couple times at different places. This is what Opticos this is what they've coined as this missing middle housing. They have been preparing, I'll call them plans, concepts for 3 different sites in the village as part of their missing middle analysis of the village. They're looking at our regulations. They're looking, what are the hurdles preventing missing middle housing from happening? What do they think would it look like to help the conversation along? And they're focusing on Block 1, the backside of Block 1, where the village is a property owner. They're also looking at Block 3, and they're looking at the village's 10 acres west of the West Terrace, where the village owns that land there, which is, again, snuggled between the West Terrace and the CLC Jawas property. And it's the same area that the village looked at doing senior housing there several years ago. So they're going to bring that back. Jennifer Settle from Opticos is going to bring that back to the PCZBA in March at a special meeting on the 7th. So I know a couple of you have been attending the first version of that, but she'll be back. And I think that is going to be a fantastic meeting for the village to continue this conversation. And the biggest issue is form, right? You talk about how the scale, right? Those are the issues. And that's the issue the village keeps bumping up against. I think there's a lot of examples that are available and built elsewhere that show that this can be, there is product that can be built in our community that people will say, that looks like a Lake Bluff house to me. Mm-hmm. But it might be multifamily, or, it'll look like it. Mm-hmm. It'll look like a single family, but it's multifamily. And so I think there's a lot of forms that make sense that people just haven't seen yet.
I think most have seen it, they're just predisposed against it.
Some, that's true. That's true. That's really what I wanted to share and kind of focus on. I can go back to any of those if anybody wants me to bring any of those back. Yeah, that's what I wanted to share. And to the point you bring up, like if the next step is going back, crack open the SWOT analysis, go through that again, go back to the strategies, prioritize them. We can get some charts we can put, and maybe label them, as this, I'm trying to get that Boston Consulting, easy, hard, kind of.
Yep.
We can work through those.
That's perhaps some homework. We can decide when we want to get together the next time, but
Yeah.
as a matter of homework, I went through and sort of circled some things on the SWOT myself this past week, and Paul and I talked about on the 12, what are the couple of the obvious things that we could sink our teeth in? Well, we talked about for a long time already about parking.
Yeah.
That's, maybe parking is the issue here with getting into missing middle and things like that, which is a big thing, and not to take anything away from where PCZBA and our consultants are headed, but we can certainly team up and provide support to their efforts if that's where we feel it's important for us to do. Paul?
Or maybe suggestions that would propel their efforts.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the other day when Mark and I met, my question was, since PCZBA is working on a long-range plan, and Opticos is working with PCZBA. Where do we fit into that? I don't want us to be redundant. I'm completely on board with everything you said, Brad. But it's like, where do we fit in that process?
Yeah.
With regard to this topic?
Yeah, I don't think there's nothing that prevents the village board to hear from the business community, whether it be this body or through the chamber, or, the other groups representing local business, that they support policy changes that, that you view as uplifting to the economy of the community. I mean, I think that is helpful. I think.
Okay, so then this, I don't mean to limit it to this, but then this board or committee would provide the voice of the business community to the Opticos plan. Is that what you're saying?
I think to the village board.
Okay.
That when they are taking in what Opticos and the PCZBA ends up recommending to them.
Okay.
I see this group as paying attention to that process, and then maybe even like opining on that, saying, we like this element of it for these reasons.
Okay,
This helps this and this and that.
okay.
So Drew, so as an example, if we look at housing as a business, which it is, and we identify the lack of multifamily housing, which we've done for the last 50 years, would it be appropriate, as was done with historic preservation, to try to define incentives to build multifamily in the areas that are already prescribed to be multifamily? R5, for example, because of the zoning overlay, you can't build a 2-unit building with 2 garage units on the same lot and still meet impervious surface or bulk regulations. And that's what's holding it up. So if you have a 50-foot lot on Oak Avenue that's in an R5 district, why don't we make a recommendation, and of course, I'm just speaking off the top of my head right now, why don't we make a recommendation that the current zoning allows for a 2,500 square foot structure, but if you build a 2-unit building that accommodates a housing type that's not available in Lake Bluff, we provide incentives to do it. Either zoning relief, tax relief, whatever it may be.
Well, I will say that is certainly in the realm of what you guys could do. I would say that, just to be clear, that Opticos, when they're looking at the villages, they're looking at the village's land use plan as well as its current zoning regulations, saying these are hurdles, to your point. Like,
Right.
the village's regulations for R5, the things you've identified, and many other things,
Can't happen.
don't further R5 construction. You need to do the following changes.
But we know that. I mean, that's
yeah,
the
it's-
issue I have, is that
Yeah.
Opticos comes in, they're paid consultants.
You
and
know
their-
that.
And their first step
Yeah.
is to interview the stakeholders.
Yeah.
And do a forum, and we all come to a meeting, and we point out on the map where we think housing is great. And we knew that all along. So I really think we need to be proactive about responding to the board with recommendations in a prioritized manner.
I think there may be, the zoning board has, certainly as part of the village's, goal to have historic preservation, has intertwined that into its zoning standards to create a different series of standards that make it easier. And there's bonuses now, there's, zoning floor area bonuses for preservation purposes. And so in a similar, I think that's within the realm of this.
Contextually similar.
Yeah. And I would go, there are, to your very first comment, Brad, that there are, the Lake County Partners is the economic development arm of Lake County. It focuses mostly on job growth, right? They're looking at large warehouses, manufacturing, pharmaceutical, but they've taken up housing as a topic. because of a handful of reasons. One is workforce housing. It is the building permits that have been issued in Lake County are less than a much smaller population in Kenosha County. They're outpacing us. And it's affordability and it's access to childcare is what they talk about. I can certainly bring them in. They'll give a presentation on all these issues.
I got employees like that.
Yeah, but it's everywhere. And it's talking about teachers, talking about anybody, in your community, that it's difficult to find affordable housing and it's not getting any easier, especially in this specific footprint of Lake County. It's very difficult. And that is harming, or it could further harm the county's ability to grow economic development. So when you don't have
No doubt.
workforce, you don't have people, you don't have jobs, so that is an issue that they're taking up.
And transportation too,
Yeah,
related to
yeah.
both of it. One thing, Paul, to your point, one area that I would see we might be able to give some input is if you do look at that comprehensive plan and what people are adding to the conversation or putting on the map and everything, there, to my last look, it seemed like there was very little business input there. It was very much families, residential, I want this, I want this, I want this. I wasn't seeing or hearing much businesses wanting, and to me, it should be a collective, of both residential, business, et cetera. So maybe that's one area that a voice can definitely be given,
Okay.
Working,
Um,
in cahoots.
Be the voice of, the business community.
Okay.
Right.
Any thoughts from Gary? Do you, and we just kind of maybe work our way around here. How do you react to this?
There's a lot to talk about. There are a lot of things, whether, we just spent a lot of time talking about real estate and that.
Yeah,
And off the top of my head, I see it every day. I'm reminded last time when Jeff talked about, I think, the railway tracks and, how you get tied up out there. I don't see that often, but maybe once a month when Jeff and I say, I don't want to go to Bluffington's, I'll go out towards Jimmy John's and get something, then I come back and I go, what the hell did I do that for? It just took me 45 minutes.
Yeah.
And then traffic is bad. Or in my situation, I look every day at the old bank across the street, across the corner, and I think,
It's a shame.
numerous presentations regarding real estate have been made for that. They've all been shot down. We talk about lack of parking, but then these studies come out and say, we don't see any issue with parking in the village at all. We just see people that don't want to walk to the train station to park. I saw some guy walking through an alley one day and I said, oh, are you over at one of the restaurants here? He says, yeah. I said, I see you walking every day. I said, I'm Gary. I introduced myself. I said, where do you park anyway? Because you're gone all day. He says, oh, I just parked behind the fire station over there by the tennis courts. And I think, so he's just turned that into his own parking lot. He found his little niche there. So I'm thinking parking, I'm thinking the building over there that was the bank, self-serving. I think of our own drive-through that went away, or LeDuc's drive-through, on his land. What do you do with that type of thing? I mean, there are all sorts of issues that, where do you start? Where do you center this on? But it is still, business. So that's, I think it needs to be whittled down as to specifically what we're gonna go after and what we're gonna do.
yeah,
Great. Yeah.
yeah.
I think Lake Bluff's tax base is real estate, and people are afraid to step away from it. If Block 3 would have been looked at differently, not listening to the immediate neighbors, there'd be 30-something residences there. Stonegate is sort of the same deal. There are a lot of people came in there with a lot of money, wanting to do something, but old school Lake Bluff wanted to ride on there. What about the schools? We got a new school. What about traffic? All these things that never truly came together because a lot of old timers were concerned about the feel of Lake Bluff. And now we're struggling for a new feel. You know, is it based upon what? Real estate? Business development? Ease of traffic? Drawing people here? There's never been anything, there's never been one thing, because there's only been a thing, real estate, that makes Lake Bluff a stronger place to be. Parking tonight sucked. I mean, the fire guys are having something going on, you know, there was virtually no place to park. Why would somebody not consider making Block 3, in a cooperation with a developer, parking garages and places above it? I mean, first, every community south of here has reinvented themselves about how to get parking downtown and places for people to stay. I think that we're short-sighted on how we make money in town, which is predominantly real estate taxes. Can't get out of our own way. In my mind's eye, there's crosstown traffic is bad, no place to park, and we're not sure how to generate more income. And a year later, 2023, last meeting, which I didn't attend, we're no closer. So I'm not sure a result from tonight or the next 5 nights, what we can do to advise the village board or the HPC or all these other folks to, you know, give some leeway to actually do something different. It's a lot of rhetoric in my eyes. Sorry, but.
No, it's like, what's gonna
Can't
be
mix
different in
words.
that 50-year period of
Well, even more
still
than
buying
that.
housing?
Yeah. It's been going on forever and nothing's happened. I think that somebody needs to figure out what's really important. Your turn.
Not much more to say. I feel the same thing, like we keep talking about the same subjects, and we haven't changed anything since we start talking, and it's always are always the same things. I still see the problems with the parking, with the. I'm very happy to know that you are changing at least, because when you were talking about the trucks that day, I was talking about how ugly, I said how bad it looks while you are waiting in the trucks or for the train to pass. And at least now I can see that there is a plan to make that area nicer. It's not going to help with housing, maybe, but it's going to help for the business, to bring more people maybe, because Lake Bluff is not going to start under the tracks or in Sheridan, it's going to start a little bit far away. I know that it's bigger than the east area, but it doesn't look like, really.
Yeah, I think it's really important. If you look around the room here, and you look at the impact of our housing business on our community, every time someone buys a house, they hire Soledad, they hire Gary to redecorate it. They hire Jeff to do a renovation to it. They hire Debbie or me to help them sell it or buy it. And it generates, every house sale generates revenue and sales well beyond the closing date, because people go into new houses and spend money. They spend money with our local business owners. They spend money with other tradespeople. They generate sales tax revenue. They're excited to be a new resident in town, and they're out in the restaurants, and they're part of the community. And I think that's what we have to really drive toward, is satisfying the needs of the residents and their housing needs. And I think if we can solve the housing issue, 9 out of 10 of the other issues will take care of themselves. I really do. All right, where would you move? If you were going to downsize from your home now, Paul, where would you go?
Probably Lake Forest,
Lake Forest?
yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's what most people think.
Yeah.
There's nowhere to stay in Lake Bluff, so I have to go to Lake Forest.
I had wanted to move across the street.
So did I.
Yeah.
So that ship sailed for no good reason.
I'm going to see a friend tomorrow at lunch, and he moved to Highland Park because
Sheridan's another one.
I waited, we waited, so,
My sister,
My-
my sister moved to Highland Park. It's like,
yeah. My
We don't
my-
have that.
My hope, to your point, Jeff, my hope is that we can find a way to focus on a couple, three things here and distill all this down, find a couple, three things where we can provide a voice and offer that voice to the village board. Having been there, if a committee like this had come in and made a more formal presentation, I honestly think it probably would have, if this group had existed and come in and done your pitch for Block 3, let's say, at the same time that we were having the other conversations about Block 3, to have multiple voices to help the village board decide what it should do, we might have had a different outcome.
Without question.
And so I guess what I'm saying is, when you look at it, we still have Block 3 to figure out. We still have, Stonebridge, I have no idea. I mean, they're a neighbor. I'm not sure where it's going to go, but assuming that they eventually are able to sell it, some developer's going to have to try to figure out what this village is interested in doing if they're going to be successful. I mean, at some point in time, that developer is going to be asking somebody in the real estate community, you know, is this a good deal? Can I do it? What could I ever do
They'd be
here?
asking for forgiveness from the village board. I mean, there are a lot of people tried to go do something out there, and standing folks in the village board killed it.
Well, you know,
Every step of the way. It's local neighbors because their homes are built in the 60s.
Yeah.
I mean, there's all kinds of stuff, but, yeah.
I tilted at the senior housing windmill for a long time. And it's, but I think what was there, again, much as with Stonebridge or Block 3, to have multiple voices talking about what the priorities are or should be for the village is provides an important determinant to the village board as they sit in judgment on what decisions to make.
To bring them to the same page, yeah.
Yeah, well, you know, I think it would have helped us to have heard multiple voices on these kinds of issues. And we heard one voice.
It's difficult for residents.
And this is recorded, isn't this great?
It's difficult for residents to come in a public forum and speak proactively in favor of a project that has not yet been developed and be criticized by their neighbors who have interest in it only for themselves as.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
And I think the biggest mistake we make is listening to a minority to satisfy their concerns because they're the vocal dissenters, to the detriment of the majority of residents who see a need for something, but are unlikely to come to a board meeting.
I'll be a little more PC than that and just say I think it's important for all voices to be heard.
Oh, I agree.
You know, and I say that not to try to be political about it, but I think it's important to have multiple voices. When it's time to make a decision on something that's really, really important, you're right. It's hard for a lot of individuals to come forward to sit out here and stand up for or against any particular issue, because that's against most people's nature.
But I think one of the roles, I mean, I came into this with a different idea about what we might be doing, but I can get on board with this. I think one of the things that, having been a trustee twice, very honestly is, and Brad's exactly right, and it doesn't necessarily limit itself to multifamily housing. We could pick any issue that had a vocal minority screaming. And as a trustee, I'd sit here thinking, you're a minority, but we're not hearing from anybody else. I don't have any political cover to make a tough decision. You know, now there are cases where both Mark and I made difficult decisions that were unpopular with people and that we got heat for. But I think for a lot of trustees, hearing from another body does make a difference because it gives them some cover.
I agree.
to
I
make
agree
a
with that
decision.
100%, Paul.
The thing is this, though, the history kind of precedes itself. You're going to go in front of the village board and you're going to try and do something, and past times that says you can't do that, and so why bother? I mean, there's always cases been precedent before, whether I need a room addition on the back of my house, but you're over bulk, my parents don't have anywhere else to go, we can't do that. And so we go in front and we give a hardship, and they're basically saying, well, you can't do that because you're killing the daylight plane, you're over bulk, or you're doing all these things. Personal residential perspective, there's always been this clamshell of, oh, no, you can't do that. No, you can't do that. No, you can't do that. No, you can't do that.
Not my bad.
And that's, no, I'm losing my light, whatever. Driving a point, that's just the residential side of the income of the village of Lake Bluff. That is a big driver, don't get me wrong, because it represents a whole bunch of income. There's all kinds of opportunities. Stonebridge is an example. Why couldn't that be something different than, 5-acre parcels? Why could that be some boutique, I don't know.
I mean,
Cul-de-sac, whatever.
our overlying zoning for any planned parcel in Lake Bluff is E5, which requires any developer or property owner to come and get approval to subdivide a $400,000 or 400,000 square foot lot that is there just because no one ever planned for something different.
Yeah. It's a daunting task.
Yeah,
It is.
so I guess I'd like to step back. We've talked about a lot of, last few minutes, a lot of issues that are charged and emotional and whatnot. At the same time, I think there are things that we can do that are perhaps much less so, but provide data and analysis to the village. If we find an issue that we're passionate about as a group, and we go to the village board and say, this is something I think that we need to prioritize. Maybe it's something that's been in the comp plan for a while,
Since the 70s.
or whatever it might be, and there are a number of things that have been in the comp plan that we really haven't executed, okay? So, it's like, guys, you need to elevate this up in the village's list of priorities.
It's got to be in the interest of all. And that's not.
So,
Well, and I think we have to figure out a way to get the communication from the silent majority. That's always the part that is so hard because, I remember Bob Kiley in Lake Forest always said, hey, the more more realtors can come out and give an objective, voice to, to a variance, to a something, to a change. It helps the board sitting there, as Paul, you just said, when you guys have to make those decisions. You're hearing all the emotion, well, let's get the facts out there objectively so that you can at least use that as well. So,
and it could be parking, it could be making adaptations to the zoning, it can be a lot of other things. We don't necessarily have to focus on Stonegate, for example.
Oh, yeah, sure.
But all I'm saying is that I'd like to be able to send us home, I'd like to send us home and say, take a look, let's set our next meeting, take a look at the SWOT, and take a look at the 12 initiatives or things like that.
Pick 3 to focus on.
Pick 2 or
Yeah,
3
I
that you
agree,
think are
yeah.
doable.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, I looked at the SWOT, and for one of these, flip it over here, wrong way. We're giving equal weight under weaknesses to high property taxes, and anonymity is not possible. Now,
I can't comment
Which-
on that.
Which ones are really reflective of something that we can do something about, or we feel are priorities or important determinants? And how do they translate into looking at something here? You know, you've got marketing plans, you've got, for, one of these is develop a three-pronged marketing plan. Another one is focusing on parking. I mean, there are things that this group has an opinion on and can feel strongly enough about and say, you know, let's throw this together and then decide which one we want to kind of sink.
Can I
into.
ask for
Please.
everybody to send me via email their top 5, and then there'll may probably be overlap in 3? I'm guessing.
You know, but to your point about hearing from those reticent to speak publicly, we heard from those people in the 2007 survey. And if you go back and look at the 2007 plan, it's a remarkable survey. We did one survey since then, and I don't think the village ever published the results of it, that I recall.
We've done multiple surveys on topics
Throughout
specific
the
to,
entire community?
Yeah.
On the,
maybe not on that particular specific issue,
no.
but there's other ways to, and maybe that can be something that flows from this is, you know, you can do some polling or some other, you know, gather interest, you know, what is the general, you know, drumbeat of the community on some of these
I
topics.
just think you have to spread it out to a wider demographic within the community, because when I came to the presentation here where we're picking out housing options, there were, 12, 15 of us maybe?
Yeah.
And it's the same people coming back, and they're all vested volunteers in the village, and the rest of them don't come, and we never hear from them. But if you send a survey where they can do it privately from their home,
Yeah.
I think you'll get a better answer from our population.
Well, this current comp plan update does have, you can do from your phone, you can do it from your home,
It's
wherever.
pretty wide, and they're
map, you
tracking
can-
how
you
many
can-
are doing it, I
You can,
think.
yeah,
How many unique.
there's different
visitors.
ways to participate, but
Well, I've gone on there. I mean, there's scattered,
there's pins everywhere,
what do you
yes.
have, 50 people that have responded out of?
No.
Yeah,
It's over 400,
yeah.
400 or 700 individual, I mean, unique
Comments,
visitors,
yeah.
anyway, isn't it? I
Yeah.
forget the number.
So,
So give me your top 5.
okay, all right. Two things, kind of housekeeping things. Number one, when do we want to get back together?
At least less than a year from now, right? To be effective.
Is this, do you feel like, do you want to meet monthly? Do you want to meet every other month? I get a feeling that if we're gonna, if you're gonna commit your time to this, you want to make it
Productive.
productive.
Yeah. I mean, you know, there's a baseline why everybody sitting in this room is here. Personal interest or for the success of the village of Lake Bluff. Sitting on a board once a month, 12 times a year and accomplishing nothing is no interest of mine, let alone once a year. Ineffective. The conversation we had this evening is kind of a rehashing, with all due respect, from more than a year ago, and what has become of our conversations? We rehatch, we understand, we focus, but then we realize there's this hurdle, and then nothing happens after that. I think that there should be a perspective that we're a driving force, for lack of a better description, to the village of Lake Bluff and all those that sit in a chair that are interested in changing something. Otherwise, it's a total waste of time.
And I think that's what Regis was looking for when he created the,
I don't want to waste my time. And, Paul?
No?
He doesn't want to waste your time either.
You don't want to waste my time.
I guess,
You know, with all due respect, I mean, it's ineffective if we're not going to be effective. If we're not going to figure out some sort of baseline of a change that the village of Lake Bluff is going to benefit from, whether it's turning Stonebridge into a boutique Kelmscott or an industrial park. I don't know. But if we're trying to develop interest in the Village Lake Bluff, if we're trying to develop a tax base, if we're trying to develop business, we need to figure out what we're trying to develop and chase it. Otherwise, this is a Wednesday night that.
I agree with you.
And I would much prefer to start these monthly meetings at 6 rather than 7.
Fair enough, me too.
Well, that's easy enough. So the March 7th meeting is that missing middle house. Do you want to have the opportunity for folks to hear that message before they weigh in or?
Yeah, why don't we hear what,
Yeah, why don't we do that? And
I'm
with that,
sorry, Drew, I missed the question.
So the PCZBA is to hear the second presentation of Opticos on missing middle housing, where they're going to be talking about Block 1, Block 3, and the 10 acres, and showing, here's some conceptual designs. Here's what, reporting back to Brad's point about all the hurdles in the zoning code. It's kind of maybe not new information to some of you, but it's going to be more specific, and you're going to see some images there that may be of interest and may help shape your top 5 list, perhaps. And then my guess is we could look to meet in that 3rd week of March before spring break, if you like.
works for me.
The week of the 18th?
I'm fishing.
Oh, truly?
Yeah, truly.
Oh, okay.
Hey, Drew, I think it would be really helpful,
What's that?
perhaps, if you still have a copy of it, of the plan I brought forward to the Plan Commission for a duplex on Washington Avenue, I believe. And it was over bulked. It was a 3-unit building, I think, originally. And, but it would have sold in a minute. And maybe if I had pushed further and longer, could have gotten it approved. But I think that's the type of structure that we need to look to. And I think if people saw it, they'd get a better understanding of what bulk really is on a residential lot that's supposed to be multifamily.
Brad, to further that point, Block 3, there could be an awful lot of really great things happening there, but there's too many opinions that drove home what cannot happen, and so any interest in that is, and you know better than most, been diffused. Nobody wants to charge in because anybody had any creative concepts to put something there was destroyed based upon all that people tried to. And so, I mean, if we can get outside the village board's perspective about what is and or is not appropriate on a spot, I mean, they're only, how long is the term there, 4 years? A person sitting there, they kind of create the era of what was then not acceptable, but today might be. And so if there's old rules and old regulations, anytime anyone wants to come and pitch a new concept, it falls back to old rules that destroyed the last person's perspective on how to do something new. Block 3 is a perfect example. 3 stories, I mean, compared to that, what's the difference? A whole bunch of
That's
people?
not next to house. I mean, that's like rehashing the whole thing then again.
But go.
I think the same people will still show up that had a problem then.
And you know what, and some of them have moved on.
I don't think there's many urban planners, and I'd be willing to bet that Opticos would say the same thing, that would find fault with having a 3-story high-end residential building adjacent to the downtown business district. It's the most logical transition of property any urban planner could ever consider.
Go from here to Chicago.
To your point,
It's everywhere.
what's going on in Highwood, where for years it was very affordable housing for workers.
No, it's not.
Not anymore.
No.
Because they're
5
providing
stories,
the
everything.
housing people want.
Yeah.
And it's driving their business community.
It's pushing,
Yes.
it's pushing on the people, I mean, affordable housing, okay, we're not affordable in Lake Bluff, truthfully. So those people are gone. It's pushing more people, more tax base, I mean, more residential living. $500,000 condo downtown Lake Bluff would not be a bad thing for Lake Bluff and the person wanting to buy it.
I don't think it would be that inexpensive.
Well, in
Part of the
reference to
problem,
it,
wasn't
the Highwood project, that's $500 a square foot.
Right.
Yeah.
Come on.
$500 a square foot is cheap compared to other parts of the country, and I think we have a jewel here that people will pay a premium for. if they're given what they want.
We're talking from a personal interest perspective, truthfully, but I think the precedence has been given to us, like, you can't do that, you can't do that, you can't do that, and don't do that. Don't even suggest this. It's a loser from the beginning. And a lot of interest has left because everybody has seen what didn't work. And Block 3 is a perfect example. Empty, trees falling over dead.
Decaying.
Yeah, I mean, because old board members, or not, maybe old Lake Bluff folks, didn't want that. If we're not capturing the,
Squeaky wheels.
if we're not capturing the ear of the village board and the community itself, then, trying to reinvent, trying to reinvest, trying to figure this out is, again, a waste of time.
Let's capture this enthusiasm and see if we
March
can
7th.
bottle it up.
Yeah.
And do something, and prioritize it and do something about it.
So you want our top 5
invite-
choices for points of interest prior to March 7th?
Yes, please.
Yeah, if you can, like, the top 5 strengths, weaknesses, each of those things, and then look through the list of strategies, there's a dozen or
Tactics,
more.
yep.
And pick out a couple, 3 or 4 of those and say,
So I might be confused on, what are we sending Drew a top 5 of? I thought it was
I don't
things
know
that
if
we
I
had to
need
work on.
SWOT top 5. I just need strategy, tactics that, unless you think there's a particular SWOT issue that you think is important to.
You're
drill
looking
down.
for something like missing middle housing.
Missing mental housing.
Parking
or-
downtown.
Yeah.
But whatever.
The
Yeah.
SWOT should help to support,
Yeah.
the
It's a
SWOT
ba-
should
SWOT's a
help to
baseline.
support
The
our
selection.
choices
Yeah.
for what's important.
Yeah, there's a derivative.
And, if you don't need to circle the SWOTs and you're going to do that, that's fine. But I think as we look at each other and we advocate for our position for what's important, to be able to tie back and say, I think it's important because it punches this and this and this button.
I'll put together like a worksheet that people can fill out. That has-
That works.
The last
Populated.
housekeeping question I have.
Did we
and-
schedule a meeting?
I'll circulate some dates. We know Mr. Lynch is not available the week of March 8th.
Okay.
We can try that first week of
The
April.
18th, I'm sorry. You said the 18th.
You said, yeah, you jumped a week.
March 18th.
Yeah.
How about the week right after?
That's
the-
spring
the-
break, 25th.
No, no,
What was
I'm
March
sorry, the
7th?
week before, sorry.
11th? The 11th?
The week right after the
March 7th,
the
yeah.
Yeah, that's the week
PCCBA
of the
meeting.
11th.
Yeah,
He did
you
say
looked at the 11th.
I did. Are you going the week of the 11th as well?
No, 18th, Monday through Friday.
Okay.
The 11th?
So the 14th would be Thursday, the 14th? Is that an option?
Worked for me.
Thursday, the 14th for the next meeting here?
Yes, sir.
In addition to March 7th.
March 7th would be, it's a PCCBA meeting, but yeah.
You may find it interesting for that set of priorities, it would be
Yeah.
a really interesting program to go to. The last thing that I have is asking you, we mentioned before, it would probably be helpful for us to have some input from a representative of the west of the tracks, those awful railroad tracks, west of the tracks business side. And if you have
Rick
I-
Lesser? Oh, he moved.
I have.
He's not west of the tracks, Brad.
He's not,
Where'd he go?
I understand that we've tried to identify somebody in the past, and I would say to you, could you help us identify somebody, and if you know of somebody that you think would be helpful, who would provide a really good voice, it would be wonderful if, give us a call, let's talk a little bit about it real quick, and then pick up the phone or knock on their door and say, hey, you could contribute to this. You're part of the Lake Bluff business community, and we need your voice. And,
I think it's great. I think there's a lot of people on the
I mean,
West Terrace
it's,
that never spoke up because there was such a
Well, they were being
Group
demonized.
against it.
Yeah, they were being demonized.
You're talking about somebody, some business.
Some business on
Well, I mean,
the,
I was just talking, as it relates to Stonebridge, there were a lot of people, a lot of people I know thought it would be great, but they never wanted to speak up.
no, I'm talking about a business person from
Right.
the Waukegan corridor.
Not a resident from the west side of town?
No.
Business.
It's possible it could be the same, one of the same, it's possible.
They
it
could
bit-
be,
yeah,
but I'm just saying, we have,
be
you know,
more than just a set
when
of
you look at
tracks.
our business representation here, it's
Dave.
a little east side
The other set
focused.
of tracks.
East of the tracks focused.
Well, I mean, Jeff doesn't even live in town, so that.
Well, no, I know that, but, you know, is there somebody who's got a business in the business park?
Those
I'm
kind of
just saying.
Or a Pasquazi's,
Yes.
or one of the automobiles dealerships, or someone like that who,
I know a guy that
insurance.
just bought a place a couple of years ago on North Shore Drive, he's a business guy, he'd be a great, I'll reach out.
Okay,
People in the
Yeah.
sanctuary too.
But you want
Residents, that's like Bluff.
us to reach to you
yeah,
first?
why don't you
Yeah.
let us know who it is, let's talk for a minute about it, and call Paul or call me or Drew, and,
I'll share it out, yeah.
yeah.
I mean, whoever is chosen is gonna be confirmed by Regis anyway, right? So it's only a recommendation.
That's all it is.
Yeah. So,
Potentials or?
Cool. Okay.
So 6 PM then, correct?
I got it, yes.
I would prefer, I don't wanna push.
You're
on
67, Brad, I mean, what the heck?
you. I'd rather go at 4, but I'll go.
But that's dinner time.
Yeah. No, that's 4:30.
all right.
So you're looking for a motion to adjourn, sir?
Move to adjourn.
So moved.
All right, thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
All right,
All right, thank you.
I think this is our most productive meeting yet. Thank you.
Paul gets the honors next time.
Recording stopped.